Welcome back to Direct Station, where politics are in retrograde. I am Kate Carey. If you've been wondering why a president of the United States plans to board a plane to Alaska, the very edge of American territory that was once a part of Russia, to meet with Vladimir Putin, signaling not only the legitimacy of the totalitarian ruler, but also the very notion of mutable borders. If you're wondering why the US military is preparing to activate National Guard troops in the streets of Washington, D.C. as the president federalizes the local police department for the first time in American history. If you've been wondering why the elites, like Tim Cook and the CEO of NVIDIA, are caving as fast as the law firms and the Ivy League universities, or why the cruel, sweeping, blind, random detentions and deportations at the hands of masked stormtroopers continue to rise. Or have you been wondering at the steady uptick in the intensity of everything in your own personal life, but also the world around you? Y'all, there is an explanation. Let's talk about it. For those of you just tuning in, hi, thanks for coming over here. I'm so excited you decided to give the podcast a try. Here's how it works. You will tolerate a little more astrology than you might in your day-to-day life, and I will provide a new way to look at what we're living through. For today's astrology, I'm going to explain one planet in depth and talk about one point in the sky and what happens when that planet hangs out with other planets at that point in the sky so that we can better understand what he's doing there now. My job is to make it accessible, make you feel like it might matter a little, provide a little hope, a little literary and historical context for what we're experiencing. Sequence will go like this. First, we'll do the news. We'll just touch base on the biggest stories, the parts that surprise and overwhelm us as this thing continues to build. Second, I'll go deep on one planet and on one point in the sky, explaining why they matter and what we can assume is happening. 3, we'll look at the historical patterns that help us understand this moment by looking at the role this planet and this point in the sky have had on humans in the past. 4, we'll make a little meaning from it all. And then 5, we'll lean on some literary wisdom from seers and sayers who have come before us in order to come up with something we can do with all of this. The news is intense, y'all, but I promise you there's a reason for it, and it is for something. Our suffering and the suffering of the other humans on the planet that we watch each day unfold is for something. Today, I want to introduce you to someone who's been making themselves very known this week. Saturn, our chief accountability officer, our accountability judge, our provider of consequences, who has just grabbed the reins and is playing a key role in events on the planet during this period of great intensity. And friends, when Saturn gets involved, everybody's bills come due, if you will. You've been feeling like consequences are arriving faster than usual. Like the gap between fucking around and finding out has gotten remarkably shorter, right? Like powerful people are suddenly being forced to show their true cards. Well, you're not imagining it. Saturn just crossed into the most public and intense point in the entire zodiac, and he has brought 29 years of receipts to that spot. So let's start with this week's news because Saturn's signature is all over it. First, we have Trump ordering up National Guard and FBI agents to occupy Washington, D.C. And as of a few hours ago, I'm tipping this on Monday, has officially federalized the Washington, D.C. police, threatening outright celebrating, frankly, police brutality in a speech this morning, claiming that Washington, D.C. is as dangerous today as Baghdad, and declaring that all of the unhoused people who live there should be, quote, moved out of the city. There's a theme overall in this conference that criminals, generally speaking, are being treated too gently, and that all of that should change now. And the place that it should change first is Washington, D.C. The cities that come after are, of course, blue, including Baltimore, Chicago, etc. Now, people are comparing this to all sorts of historical moments, certainly in other countries with other leaders, never our own here in America, where it turns out we are not, in fact, exceptional. But what strikes me astrologically is the timing. Saturn in the skyland of Aries says, I will show you what control really looks like. No more subtle manipulation, no more plausible deniability, just raw, visible force, visible in the nation's capital. and all across the country in places where one might stereotype an immigrant population. When Saturn crosses the Aries point, that's the portal between the Pisces skyland and the Aries skyland at 0 degrees Aries. Remember, the sky is one big circle. Skylands are apportioned, sort of like numbers on a traditional clock. The skyland of Aries borders the skyland of Pisces. And every time you start a new skyland, you start over at 0. It runs 0 through 29, then the next skyland, right? And so at 0 degrees of Aries we find the Aries point. Saturn is dancing on that point. He's a little past it now at 1 degree, as is his buddy Neptune, but he's at that point now. He's a little bit past that point now at 1 degree, but he is in retrograde and he is heading back for it today. At 1 degree and then 0 degrees of Aries, Saturnian authority stops pretending to be anything other than what it is. The mask doesn't slip off. It gets ripped off entirely. Of course, we do also have our president heading to Alaska to meet with the Russian president. Let me say that again. The American president is traveling to American soil that's as close as you can get to Russia to meet with Vladimir without NATO, without Ukraine, without any of our allies who have been holding this coalition together. Saturn is the planet of debt, my friends, old debt, long-standing obligation. So when Saturn gets activated like this, people pay what they owe. And the fact that Trump is literally traveling to Putin, conceding the power position of making someone come to you, that is Saturn collecting. The question we should all be asking, of course, is what is the debt being paid here? Are we, in fact, repeating the mistakes of 1938, wherein Neville Chamberlain, the then Prime Minister of England, met with Hitler in Munich and said, no, if we agree to X, Y, and Z, would you promise not to invade anybody? Could you just back off and kind of step back and do what you're doing locally? How did that work out, right? So now Saturn, who is kind of ruthless about consequences that involve denying reality. Remember, Saturn rules physics, time, the laws of nature. You can deny gravity all you want, but Saturn will still drop you when you step off that cliff. And so finally, and this one's fascinating, the administration just designated multiple gangs as terrorist organizations, specifically invoking language about protecting the hemisphere. People who know their history are immediately connecting this to America's misdeeds in Central and South America, dating back to the Monroe Doctrine. And its planetary history is relevant to today's story. Of course it is. You know what's wild? The Monroe Doctrine was declared in 1823 when another major planet was at 0 degrees of Aries, exactly where Saturn is right now. Same spot, different planet, same American impulse to declare dominion over this entire side of the world. But here's what's different. When Pluto, that other planet, was there, it was about transformation through power. Now Saturn is there. Saturn is about consequences for power. Every previous American intervention across the world under the Monroe Doctrine banner, every coup we backed, every democracy we undermined, every dictator we propped up, Saturn remembers all of it. And Saturn, at the Aries point, makes those debts and their consequences public, loud, and impactful. This is why it feels so intense right now. Okay, so who is this Saturn? Who is this guy hanging out at 0 degrees while our president occupies Washington, D.C. and heads for an appeasement meeting with Vladimir Putin? Who is Saturn and what is he doing at 0 degrees of Aries? Why does that position matter so much? Let me introduce you to Saturn the way you usually know him in your life. Saturn is that moment when the credit card bill arrives after the vacation. He's the morning after the party when you have to face what you did. He is the pregnancy test that shows 2 lines when you weren't looking for that particular change in your life. He is the dad standing in the doorway when you come home past curfew. He is the performance review that's been postponed 3 times and finally gets scheduled after a tense interaction with your boss. Saturn is basically the universe's way of saying, let's get real. He is gravity. He's the force that keeps you anchored to reality, whether you like it or not. I like to think of Saturn as a grumpy but ultimately helpful grandpa. He's annoying because he's grumpy and gruff, but what he wants is what's best for you. He tracks when you're doing things you know you shouldn't be, and he ensures that one way or another we are clear about what those things are and what would be within integrity instead, right? So in your personal life, Saturn shows up every 29 years, so the same spot he was when you were born. That's your Saturn return. And if you are or have been around 29, 58, or 87, you would feel him intensely these days, right? So those are times when what you are or have been serious about, or what you should be serious about, gets a reality check. 29 is a time when many of us are getting married or committing to something bigger or larger than ourselves. 58 is a time when who we've been as adults gets a kind of grade or an upgrade or a checkup, if that makes any sense. We keep going as we were, or we are met with some serious constraint that demands reflection and evolution. But he also makes other aspects harsh angles to where he was when you were born throughout your life. Every 7 years or so, Saturn asks, have you learned the lesson yet? Have you done the work? Have you earned this next level, right? I mean, it's truly eye roll city. But it's always for good in the end, after the suffering. But if you haven't sorted that mess by the time Saturn is activating your chart, it will sort you. Not to harm you, to level you up, but it isn't always fun. Here's the thing about Saturn that makes him different from every other planet. He's absolutely fair, but he's also absolutely ruthless. If you have done the work, Saturn rewards you with things that last. The relationship you built slowly and carefully under Saturn's watch, that's the one that goes the distance. The career you built brick by brick while Saturn tested you, that's the one that weathers the storm. But if you've been cutting corners, if you've been avoiding reality in any way, if you've been building on lies or delusions or trying to get away with habits or systems that lack integrity, watch out. And I'm not talking about like grand evil. I'm talking about all of us bouncing in and out of our own definition of integrity, right? This is again not some moral high ground coming from the sky. This is just a reality check when we are in or out of integrity. We all know where we stand vis-a-vis our own definition of integrity at all times, right? So Saturn will bring us to our knees and say, now do you get it? Those times aren't fun, but they're for something. But here's where things get really interesting. Saturn isn't just anywhere right now. He is at 1 degree in the skyland of Aries, having just crossed what astrologers call the Aries point. And he is in retrograde. So he's going to go back and forth over that point before he's done affecting world history. 0 degrees Aries is like Times Square on New Year's Eve. It's the world stage. It's the cosmic megaphone. When any planet crosses this point, whatever that planet represents becomes public, becomes collective, becomes everybody's business. And the years where there's a lot going on with that point tend to be big years in history. Think of the zodiac as a giant wheel. The Aries point is where that wheel begins. It's the spring equinox point, the place where the sun crosses the celestial equator. It's literally where the personal becomes public, where individual becomes collective. It's the most watched point in the entire zodiac. People born when that point was on the eastern horizon, like Oprah, like Nostradamus, or even, if this helps, Nancy Kerrigan, tend to at least at some point become everyone's business, right? So when Saturn, Mr. Consequences, Mr. Reality Check, Mr. Time's Up, crosses that point, everyone's bill comes due at the same time, in public, more or less. These things always vary based on how any event in the sky is interacting with your own natal chart, right? So the collective goes through it, and each of us do personally wherever it hits our chart, if that makes sense. So let me give you some historical examples of what happens when Saturn hits that Aries point. April 1967. Martin Luther King Jr. gives his Beyond Vietnam speech, breaking with LBJ publicly, connecting civil rights to the anti-war. The summer of love begins as youth collectively reject their parents' reality. The Six-Day War reshapes the Middle East. You see the pattern. Authority being challenged, reality being questioned, consequences arriving for empire. April 1937, Saturn at 0 degrees of Aries, the Hindenburg disaster, the literal and symbolic end of an era of grand delusions. Guernica is bombed, becoming the first televised atrocity, showing the world what modern warfare really looks like and shocking the senses as Franco, Spain's dictator, blesses a bombing of Basque Country in order to advance his own war. Saturn strips away the romantic notions of war and technology in one devastating spring, right, for all the world to see. March 1908, Saturn is at 0 degrees of Aries. Austria annexes Bosnia, setting up the conditions for World War I. So old empires hit Saturn's reality check and they start their death process. The pattern is clear. When Saturn hits the Aries point, authority gets tested publicly. Empires shift in significant ways per accumulated consequences. And what's been hidden becomes visible to all of us. As you may know, I have been harping on about the fact that Saturn is now hovering around that 0 degrees point with somebody else, right? The company he's keeping this year and next is part of what makes this moment so unprecedented. He is currently, as things get super wild here in the throes of August, very, very, very close, like way less than a degree to an exact conjunction with Neptune. And that conjunction will be at 0 degrees Aries when it happens. Well, friends, that hasn't ever happened before in recorded human history. The closest, meaning the only time they were together anywhere near that 0 degrees of Aries mark, was at 11 degrees in 1703. The year St. Petersburg was founded, the year the Great Storm, a subtropical cyclone, hit England, collapsing thousands and thousands of chimneys all over London, toppling ships, ending lives, right? It's also the year of a decisive battle in the War for Spanish Succession. Neptune is dreams, illusion, spirituality, disillusion. Saturn is reality, structure, consequences, and crystallization. When they meet, dreams hit reality hard. So think of it this way. Neptune is the beautiful delusion, the spell, the fantasy we've all been under. Saturn is the harsh light of morning that shows what's actually there. When they meet at that Aries point, the most public point in the zodiac, everybody's delusions, we assume, would get a massive reality check simultaneously. In 1703, the collision between dreams and reality reshaped reality for millions. And Uranus, Mr. Chaos, and Pluto, Mr. Transformation, were not even in the mix as they are today, right? So these other variables that are also very, very significant were not even in the sky in 1703 when these two were not even on the point we're talking about, but as close to that point as we can find in human history. But let's learn more about just Saturn himself, right? And his other friends at that degree point so that we can start to imagine what this round with Neptune, Mr. Dreams and Illusions, that started in April of this year, if you'll recall, not a very calm time, through, say, May of next year, might mean. So if we think of Saturn at 0 degrees Aries as the harsh judge who sets up court at the world's busiest intersection, we can look for information when other planets pass through, joining exactly with Aries at or at least near that same world point to testify. We don't actually have any recorded history of Saturn meeting anybody exactly on that point. So we can use examples that are close to it, and we can imagine, if we can, more intense versions of what I'm about to share, right? So in Mars, for example, Mr. Aggression, Mr. Action, Mr. Assertion meets Judge Saturn 2 degrees from the Aries point, for example. The warrior meets the wall. Aggressive force hits immovable reality. The last time that happened was April 1996. The Port Arthur massacre in Australia leads to complete gun reform. Dunblane in Scotland does the same. The Unabomber's reign of terror finally ends. So when Mars meets Saturn here, violence gets consequences that actually stick. When Jupiter, on the other hand, Mr. Expansion, meets Saturn a little farther into Aries, we can get expansion meeting contraction at the world stage, about 10 degrees out. So it's not exact at 0 degrees, but they're close in 1821. And look what happened. Greece wins independence. Mexico wins independence. Peru wins independence. Gran Colombia forms. Literally the entire map of the Western Hemisphere redraws itself in a single year. When the planet of growth meets the planet of boundaries at this same spot, old limits shatter, but new structures form immediately. Different planet now. When Uranus meets Saturn, Mr. Chaos, Mr. Revolution, just 4 degrees from Aries now. Revolution meets reality. The last time they were both in early Aries was 1762. Catherine the Great takes power in Russia. The British Empire reaches its peak, acquiring new territories. Jean-Jacques Rousseau publishes The Social Contract, literally defining what government means. So when the breakthrough of Uranus meets the breakdown of Saturn at that degree, at or near this degree we're talking about today, the old order doesn't just change, it becomes literally unthinkable. So then we have to wonder what happens when Saturn and Neptune do meet at that 0 degree mark. Literally no one knows. But your guess now, after hearing these examples, is as good as any. If we look at the world as it is today, certainly we see an empire reaching. We see an empire overreaching. We certainly see a destabilized natural world. We certainly see violence worthy of consequences. We certainly see national borders threatening to move. This is what's building right now as our president plans to fly to the edge of Russia. This is what perfects in February of 2026. Neptune is the spell we've been under. Saturn is the reality check. When they meet at any point, illusions shatter. But when they meet at 0 degrees of Aries, the most public point in the entire zodiac, everyone's illusions shatter simultaneously. You see? In public, with no room for denial. Many of the wise ones are saying about this, for example, that something will occur that brings our competing facts into alignment, so that what I believe to be true lines up with someone who currently lives in an alternate reality, or as Nicole Wallace would say, Earth 2, right? I'm hearing a lot of speculation that perhaps those realities will merge. And plenty of astrofolk believe that Trump is the man for this job, ironically, tragically. The last time Saturn and Neptune met exactly at any cardinal point, there are 4 of them, long story, don't need to go into it. The other 3 are a big deal too, but not as big a deal as this one. But when in 1683, when they met at 0 degrees of Cancer, the Ottoman Empire, which seemed absolutely unstoppable, hit a wall in the Battle of Vienna and began something that I mentioned earlier is going to sort of escalate when these two are together in Aries, began a 240-year decline that ended with its complete dissolution. The coffee house culture that emerged in Vienna after that battle, I am not making this up, from the coffee beans left behind by the retreating Ottomans, became the birthplace of the Enlightenment. Seriously. One soldier guy knew what the giant cache of beans were because he had spent time within the empire, and all his friends thought they were camel food. So he's like, no, I'll take them. I'll have that be my thing that I take out of here. So he starts a coffee shop, and the rest is history. The death of one empire's dream literally creates the spaces where new ideas would ferment. The new dream could begin. So when Saturn and Neptune perfect their conjunction at 0 degrees Aries in February of 26, we are not just getting Saturn's reality check, we are also getting the complete dissolution of a collective delusion that has held us for decades, maybe centuries. The American dream is on the table. Manifest destiny is on the table. The mythology of meritocracy is on the table. White supremacy is on the table. Pick your favorite collective spell and wonder whether it can be broken or will be broken as this reckoning occurs. Saturn and Neptune at the Aries point means but they all get reality checked at once. All delusions, all mass delusions get reality checked at once. And this is what we're seeing now. The occupations, the genuflecting to Putin, the attack on science itself, these are not random authoritarian moves. These are the desperate actions of people whose bodies can feel Saturn approaching with Neptune in tow. They know the spell is threatening to break. They subconsciously know the bill is coming due. They're doing everything they can to grab what they can before that reckoning comes. When Saturn and Neptune meet at that cosmic megaphone and announce to everyone exactly what's been happening behind the curtain, right? So exactly what that judgment is, we don't know. But here's the thing about Saturn. You cannot escape him by running faster. You cannot avoid consequences when you have been living out of your own definition of integrity. In fact, the more frantically you try to escape Saturn's reckoning, the more material you give him for the public trial. The desperate moves these leaders are making, Saturn is writing them all down. They know you, whenever you're doing something terribly wrong or terribly unacceptable, you know it, right? Like they can dream whatever dream they want. They can call it whatever they like. They can have a fortified earth to reality that is reinforced by their entire media ecosystem. But when Saturn meets Neptune at 0 degrees of Aries, he is going to read the receipts to the entire world, and Neptune will be forced to fashion a new dream. But here's a beautiful thing about Saturn and why I actually love this planet, despite his harsh reputation, despite the ways in which he has caused reckonings in my life, right? Saturn is ultimately about maturity. He's about mastery. He's about building things that last. So Saturn tears down what's built on lies, but he protects what's built on truths. When you do a synastry reading to look at a couple, like when somebody meets somebody new and they're like, can you tell me if it's going to work out, if it's going to be a good relationship, right? You see what Saturn is doing. You see how proximal Saturn is. You see what's happening in your chart versus the other person's chart vis-a-vis Saturn. And if Saturn is playing a key role in that synastry, the thing is real. It might not be awesome, but it's going to last. It's going to be a big deal in your life, right? But he also, because Saturn also delivers rewards for those who have done the work. So Saturn says time's up to what is unsustainable. But he always says it's time for whatever's been waiting to be born. In Tucson, I used to work at at Antigone's Books, one of the country's last and hardiest feminist bookstores. And we used to sell these bumper stickers that said, do your Saturn. And at 22, I was like, what is that? Well, now I know. Doing your Saturn is what you ought to do, right? We have lists. We all have lists. We don't like at least half of the things on that list, but we know what the lists are. Whenever I'm reading somebody's chart and they're suffering through some hard Saturnian aspect, businesses crumbling, affairs coming to light, recklessness leading to harm, lost tempers affecting the workplace, right? I always ask, what are you supposed to be doing that you're not? And every person always knows the answer. Everybody always knows what's on the list that they're supposed to be doing and they're not. Think of him as how parents sometimes use Santa Claus, making a list and checking it twice, right? Except without the sort of Judeo-Christian morality that so many of us find it easy to conjure and wield at ourselves. Santa Claus without moral judgment, right? So you know the list. The breakdown we're witnessing isn't random destruction. It is Saturn clearing the field for what's real, what's actually true, what's actually beautiful, what doesn't yet exist and needs to be born that would be real. Right. So our country has made all of these claims about who we are and how we take care of each other, but it hasn't been real, right? We haven't been taking care of everyone at all. In fact, the amount of people who have everything they need is shrinking quickly, right? So you get this smaller and smaller group who not only have what they need, but have much more than they need, while so many other people don't have what they need, including bodily autonomy, including safety. Right. So I know this is kind of a scary episode, but I find that it actually helps to understand that there is something bigger and louder than you or me at play here. Like when I watch our president federalize a fucking police force in an American city, I know we are on to some new shit, right? So it helps me to understand better what that's about and what it might lead to. My mother's going to hate that last sentence, but I won't re-say it without swear words because it's so much, right? A reckoning is coming. All I can really do is do my own Saturn, right? Tend to my own stuff, tend to my own safety, tend to my own consciousness, tend to my own community and my own systems of care. The rest is going to do its thing. We just didn't know we were going to live through one of those cataclysmic moments, is all. Lots of people have before us, right? We'll be all right. And Saturn never, ever screws things up unless it's for something, right? Another way to think about this and another way to have compassion for yourself is to notice the dramatic increase in frequency that we're living through, right? Rick Levine, a beloved, brilliant scholar and a teacher of astrology, likes to talk about this. He says, quote, when you look at the vibratory rate of our beings and you go back 150 years ago, the fastest thing vibrating around us was the day and night rhythm, or maybe the seasons. And now, when radio came on board in the early 20th century, all of a sudden we had all these devices that were vibrating at kilohertz, thousands of cycles a second, right? Now everyone has devices in our pockets that are vibrating at gigahertz. That's billions of cycles a second. So we are ascending. Our vibration rates are ascending, he says. Right. So Rick is pointing out that something powerful and important, and I really do believe beautiful, is happening to all of humanity and to the planet itself. I'm not saying the phones and the frequency the phones are bringing is beautiful. I am saying we are all ascending, right? So the frequency that we are all functioning on is rising fast. Many of us are having a hard time adjusting to that, but it's for something. It feels like a lot, my dear friends, because it's a lot, but we are resilient creatures, right? We are capable of adapting and adapting and adapting. Again, look at us already. Without knowing it, we've been gearing up for this great reckoning our entire lives. The frequency's grown with each year we've been here. We'll be able to tolerate it and perhaps even be significant contributors to it as it arrives. We're built for this, y'all. You chose to be on this planet with these people at this time for a reason. So how do we work with Saturn at that Aries point as we head towards that climax in February of 26? First, we got to understand that we are in a period where consequences, like everything else, are accelerated. What might normally take years to unfold is happening in months. The gap between action and result is shrinking dramatically. Second, we got to recognize that this is happening to everyone simultaneously. The billionaires, the authoritarians, the institutions, they're all hitting Saturn's wall at the same time, just like you are. Nobody's exempt from this transit. They might be in fancier houses than us, but their lives are being disrupted just as much as yours and mine. Part of Neptune's illusion is to show us glimpses of other people's lives that are polished and presentable. Like 365 days of Christmas photos, right? Like, see me as I wish to be seen. Well, that's all we see online, right? That or suffering, right? It's hard to believe that this is happening to all of us, but it is. And then third, this is the time to get radically honest about what's sustainable and what isn't in your personal life and in our collective systems. Saturn rewards those who face reality voluntarily rather than waiting to be forced to do it. So what is your list? We know what the country's list is. We're clear what the country's list is, right? But what's yours? All right, so Shakespeare once said, truth is truth till the end of reckoning. And Omar Khayyam, an 11th century Persian polymath renowned for his work in mathematics and astronomy, said something similar. He said, yeah, the morning of creation wrote what the last dawn of reckoning shall read. Right? These, like, your time and my time are all connected, even if we are not in the same time, right? So the reckoning that occurs in my time informs the dream that happens, that informs the dawn of what happens in the next, right? So Saturn's gift hidden in this harsh medicine is forcing us to face what we've been avoiding. And in that facing, benevolent change and even beauty becomes possible. Rilke understood Saturn's energy. He once said, quote, perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses, who are only waiting to see us act just once with beauty and with courage. Perhaps everything that frightens us is, in its deepest essence, something helpless that wants our love. So Saturn seems like the dragon, but he's actually the teacher who wants us to grow into what we as individuals and as a collective are meant to be. Ursula K. Le Guin affirms that. She says, we live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. So I want to close today with a couple of things. I want to offer 3 things to you. First, I want to offer an action. This week, pay one debt: emotional, financial, spiritual. Choose something you've been putting off. Choose a place in your life where you are fairly certain that you are living out of integrity. Saturn loves voluntary accountability. Do your damn Saturn, right? You know the list. Do one of them. Take care of it. Resolve it before Saturn demands it. Second, I want to offer you a reflection or a practice. So in the morning time, or in a journal, or, certainly even also in conversation with someone that makes you feel safe. Here's the question. What am I pretending to not know? Saturn's meeting with Neptune at 0 degrees of Aries is dissolving the boundary between conscious and unconscious knowledge, right? So the more honest you are with yourself now, the gentler that transit will be. Any heavy vibration that you're experiencing in your life today, any massive disruption that you or small disruption that you're experiencing in your life today is a result of the proximity of these 2 things being very, very close to each other. Again, within much less than 1 degree of each other, very, very one degree away from that Aries world point. So wherever that massive disruption or small disruption is happening in your life, that's your signal. That's the trailer for the movie that would occur in your life in February of 2026. Were you not to handle it? Were you not to do your Saturn in that spot, in that area? If it's not obvious to you, have somebody look at your chart and find out where it is. But I imagine it's pretty obvious to you where your life is being dramatically disrupted, right? What do you know that you don't yet know? So I'm a life coach, and what I have come to understand is that everyone has a confession they haven't yet made to themselves, and it's haunting them. It's like behind their eyes. And when they finally come to know it, it's just like an eye roll moment. It's like, oh, yes, yes, I know, thank you, I know, right? And so do something with it. The reason I want you to do that is so that the disruption doesn't intensify the way it's going to for our leaders, the way it's going to for authoritarians, the way it's going to for elites who have gone along with this, right? Your proximity to integrity when that climax arrives will dictate how this unfolds for you in your personal life. We have a lot to tolerate collectively. Let's shore ourselves up so that what we go through then is more pleasant personally. Finally, I want to offer some inspiration from Diane de Parma, who in 1971 wrote 63 gorgeous revolutionary letters. The reason I want to do that is because I don't want you to walk away from this episode being like, Jesus, there's so much happening and we're not even there yet, right? Like, of course, that's terrifying. But I don't share that with you in order to frighten you. I share that with you in order to invite you into an awareness when you see the signs, right? So when you see a federalization of the DC police force, you go, oh, there it is, right? Not like, what the hell is happening? Like, I'll tell you what's happening. That's Saturn and Neptune almost touching and almost on Aries world point, right? So as we watch that peak in our world, as we watch that intensity rise every day, as we feel that frequency shake us to our bones each day, as we take a moment for summer vacation and return, noticing that fascism is officially gripping our nation, right? We have to consider how we will orient to that problem as a collective. Yeah, we're going to take care of our personal stuff so that our personal stuff isn't undoing us as well. And we have got to shore up the collective in the meantime, right? We have got to prepare for what is required of us if this thing is going to unfold the way it ought to. It's not guaranteed. Here's what Department says in Revolutionary Letter number 7. She says, don't get uptight. The guns will not win this one. They are not an incidental part of the action, which we better damn well be good at. What will win is mantras, the sustenance we give each other, the energy we plug in, the fact that we touch and share food, the Buddha nature of everyone, friend and foe, like a million earthworms tunneling under this structure till it falls. Diane DeParma, 1971. Saturn at the Aries point says the bill is coming due for all the old systems. What we build in its place is going to be up to us. How we endure that transition is going to be up to us. The consequences of the transition is actually, even though it doesn't feel like it very much right now, up to us. Who's going to stop them? Somebody who's here right now. A group of people who are here right now, who are gathering their strengths to do what must be done in order to stop this. Are you a part of that group? If you want to understand how Saturn is affecting your personal chart as he makes this historic journey, I would be honored to look at it with you. I provide readings and coaching. I would love to do a little bit of that with you. My email is in the episode description if you want to track me down. I ask you also to provide a review if you haven't yet. I ask you also to comment in all the places and make all the socials light up, you know. I ask you to share the podcast with your friends so that we can grow the conversation, grow some level of comfort as we tolerate this insanity. Saturn is here to make us real. He is not here to punish us. And reality, even when it's harsh, is where the true power lies, right? The hardest things that have ever happened to you are the things that have made you the strongest, the clearest, the most knowledgeable, the most prepared, the most knowing, the most wise. That's what's coming in this journey. It is not easy. It is going to be less easy as it progresses, but it's for something. So until next time, be well, be conscious, and be kind. I'll see you soon.